You're nothing but a worthless old mechanic. Don't embarrass Amanda by showing up at the rehearsal dinner. That was the first thing her future mother-in-law, Diane, said to me, right there in her polished living room in Carmel, Indiana. Crystal chandelier above us, wine glasses clinking in the background, and me standing there in my work boots after driving straight from the shop. I'd been called a lot of things in my life, but worthless cut deep, especially because I'd worked my hands raw to give my daughter, Amanda, the kind of life Diane's family was born into. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now. My name's Michael Grant. Folks around Evansville know me as Mike from Grant's Auto, a little two-bay garage my father started back in the 70s. I never left Indiana, never chased big dreams, but I made an honest living. Paid off my mortgage on a small ranch house, drove the same Chevy Silverado for 15 years, and raised Amanda after her mother left when she was 10. Amanda was my whole world. I made every school play, every softball game, even when I was covered in grease and dog-tired. When she got into Purdue, I nearly cried. Paid every tuition bill, every textbook, even her off-campus apartment rent. No loans, just long hours, overtime, and a second mortgage on my house to get her through. And when she graduated, landed a good job in Indianapolis, and met Jacob, the lawyer's son of Diane and Richard Kessler, I thought maybe all those sacrifices had been worth it. At first, they welcomed me politely. Dinner invitations, small talk about cars I couldn't afford, smiling faces that didn't quite reach their eyes. But as the wedding planning started, the cracks showed. I didn't fit their image. I didn't know wine pairings. My suit looked off the rack because it was still, I kept quiet. I wanted Amanda happy. I wanted her to feel like she belonged. Until Diane looked me in the eye and said those words. Worthless. Amanda sat beside her, cheeks red, lips pressed tight. She didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me. I nodded, clenched my jaw, and left without a word. But as I drove back down I-69, headlights slicing the dark, something inside me hardened. They thought I was worthless? They had no idea who they were dealing with, or how much of their wealth had been propped up by the very man they dismissed. Because what they didn't know was that I wasn't just Amanda's father. I was also the man who'd quietly been holding the deed to the very property Diane and Richard Kessler called their legacy estate. And if they wanted to see worthless, I was about to show them what losing everything looked like. The following week, I got my answer about where I stood in Amanda's new world. She called one evening, her voice clipped, rehearsed, like she'd been coached. Dad, about the rehearsal dinner. It's really just close family, you know? Smaller, intimate. It might be better if you just came to the ceremony instead. I sat in my recliner, staring at the framed photo of her in her softball uniform, dirt streaked across her cheek, smiling at me from 15 years ago. Better for who? I asked quietly. She hesitated. Then came the words that cut me in half. For everyone, Dad. Please, don't make this harder than it has to be. There it was. Not just Diane's voice in the background anymore. It was Amanda's too. I wanted to argue, to remind her who paid for the cleats on her feet, the braces on her teeth, the tuition that got her that shiny career. But my tongue felt heavy. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just Diane and Richard's doing. My own daughter had started to believe I didn't belong. The humiliation didn't stop there. That Friday, I walked into the bank to make my regular mortgage payment. Old Mr. Harlan, the manager, gave me a sympathetic smile. "Rough week, Mike. Heard some things about the wedding." Word traveled fast in Evansville. By the time I grabbed a cup of coffee at Millie's Diner, 2 booths over, folks were whispering. I caught fragments. "In-laws think he's trash. Not even invited to the dinner." It was a small town. People knew me. They knew I'd bent my back to raise Amanda right. And yet, gossip stung worse than a slap dot. That Sunday, at church, Diane and Richard sat up front with Amanda and Jacob, all polished in their Sunday best. I caught Diane's eyes when I walked in, grease still under my nails from a late-night transmission job. She leaned toward another woman and whispered something, and they both chuckled. I could have ignored it, could have bowed my head and prayed. But Diane made sure her voice carried just enough for me to hear. Some people just don't know their place. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles ached. Later, after service, I tried to approach Amanda in the parking lot. She kept her smile fixed, like she was wearing a mask. "Dad, not now," she whispered. "Please, don't cause a scene." "Amanda," I said, my voice shaking, "I've stood by you your whole life. Why are you letting them treat me like this?" She avoided my eyes. "It's just different now. Jacob's family. They move in different circles. I don't want things to be awkward." Awkward. That was her word for it. I swallowed the bitterness, nodded slowly, and walked back to my truck. But inside, something snapped. Because Diane thought she'd stripped me of my dignity. She thought she'd boxed me out of her glittering world. What she didn't realize was that I'd been carrying a card up my sleeve for years. Quiet, patient, waiting for the right moment. And when I played it, it wouldn't just embarrass her. It would dismantle everything she thought made her powerful. The night after that church parking lot, humiliation, I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of black coffee and a folder I hadn't opened in years. The old ceiling fan above me clicked. Every few seconds, the sound filling the silence of my empty house. Inside the folder were papers my father had passed down when he died. My dad wasn't wealthy, but he was smart. Back in the late 70s, he'd bought up some farmland outside of Carmel, cheap at the time, figuring it might one day be worth something. Over the years, parcels were sold off, but one piece remained. Piece the Kessler family had built their so-called legacy estate on. Thing was, they didn't own the land outright. They held a long-term lease, tied up in old agreements, overlooked for decades. The actual deed still sat in my name, Michael Grant. I'd never used it, never even thought to. Why would I? Amanda was happy, and the Kesslers seemed harmless enough. But now, after being called worthless and shoved to the margins of my daughter's life, that paper suddenly looked like power. The next morning, I drove to Mark Delaney's law office. Mark had been my attorney for years, helped me with my divorce, handled the mortgage when I nearly lost the shop during the 2008 crash. He was loyal, discreet, and above all, practical. He adjusted his glasses as I slid the deed across his desk. "Mike, where did you dig this up?" "My dad's estate," I said, "and I need to know what I can do with it." Mark leaned back, scanning the yellowed document. Well, this is interesting. The Kesslers only have a leasehold, which means—" He tapped the paper with his pen. "You've got leverage. You could terminate the lease, jack up their rent, or sell the property out from under them. Legally, you'd be in the right." I felt a strange calm wash over me. "So, Diane thinks I'm worthless, huh?" Let's see how worthless I look when I hold the ground under her mansion. Mark gave me a long look. Mike, you sure you want to go down this road? This could get ugly. I nodded slowly. She humiliated me. My own daughter sat there and let her. I don't want revenge for spite, Mark. I want respect. If they won't give it, I'll take back what's mine. Over the next week, Mark helped me file the paperwork to review the lease. He warned me it would stir the pot, but I didn't flinch. The Kesslers had built their castle on borrowed soil, and I was done pretending I didn't notice. Meanwhile, gossip around town kept spreading. At the diner, I overheard someone say, "Did you hear? Diane's planning a gala at their estate, supposed to be the biggest event of the year." I sipped my coffee and smiled to myself. That gala was about to turn into the stage for my quiet revenge. Because Mark had timed it perfectly. The notice to the Kesslers about their lease was scheduled to land on Diane's doorstep the morning of her precious gala. And by that evening, the whole town would know who really owned the ground she stood on. The night of the Kesslers' gala, Carmel looked like something out of a movie. The estate's long driveway shimmered with strings of lights, the lawn trimmed sharp as a putting green. Luxury cars lined the gravel path, Mercedes, BMWs, even a Rolls. I parked my old Chevy Silverado down the road and walked the rest of the way, the crunch of gravel under my boots sounding louder than it should have. Folks in tuxedos and gowns turned their heads when they saw me. Some gave polite nods, others whispered. Inside, the chandeliers glowed, and a jazz quartet played in the corner. Waiters circled with silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. Diane floated across the room in a sequined dress, smiling wide as she held court with Carmel's finest. When she spotted me, her smile tightened into a sneer. She excused herself from her circle and marched over. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her pearls catching the light. "I came to celebrate," I said evenly. "After all, this estate is practically family property." She laughed coldly. "Family property? Michael, you've confused yourself again. This is our home. You don't belong here." But just then, a courier stepped through the door, holding a large envelope. "Delivery for Richard and Diane Kessler," he announced. Richard took it, frowning. The crowd hushed as he tore it open and scanned the papers. His face drained of color. Diane leaned over his shoulder, her smile collapsing. Mark's timing had been perfect. The notice was clear. The land their mansion sat on, their pride and joy, was leased, and the leaseholder, me, was terminating it. Diane's voice trembled, but she tried to mask it with bravado. This is a mistake. Some clerical error." I stepped closer, my voice calm but carrying across the room. "No mistake, Diane. My father bought this land in 1978. You've been tenants ever since. And tenants answer to their landlord." A ripple of shock ran through the guests. Whispers flew like sparks. "He owns the land? All these years?" Amanda's eyes found mine across the room. Her face was pale, lips parted. She'd never heard this part of the story. Richard tried to recover, puffing his chest. "You wouldn't dare. We've built everything here. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "And I have." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the jazz quartet had stopped mid-song. Diane's hands shook as she clutched the notice. Her voice broke, high and brittle. "You're ruining us. You'll destroy Amanda's future." I've met her gaze, steady. "No, Diane. You tried to erase me from Amanda's future. You called me worthless. Tonight, everyone here knows the truth. You've been living your whole life on land that never belonged to you." Gasps echoed. Someone muttered, "Poetic, isn't it?" I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat. I simply turned to Amanda. "You wanted me invisible, but I was never gone. I was the foundation beneath your feet, and without respect, no foundation holds." Then I walked out, the night air cool against my skin, leaving their glittering gala in shambles. Behind me, I could still hear Diane's voice cracking, Richard's angry bluster, and the murmurs of Carmel's elite as they realized the mighty. Kesslers were standing on borrowed ground. But the real fallout was yet to come. Because the next day, when the banks, vendors, and even the town papers got wind of it, the Kesslers wouldn't just lose their pride. They'd lose everything. By sunrise the next morning, Carmel was buzzing. The Kesslers' gala, meant to cement their status as the first family of Hamilton County, had instead become a scandal. News spread faster than wildfire. At Millie's diner, folks flipped open their morning papers, whispering over pancakes. At the bank, tellers traded glances when Diane stormed in, demanding reassurance about her assets. But the papers were clear. The Kesslers' estate sat on land they didn't own, their lease canceled, their future in limbo. By Monday, lawyers were circling like vultures. Diane and Richard tried to bluff, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But Carmel's elite had already turned their backs. Invitations dried up. Business partners pulled away. Even Jacob's law firm distanced itself, not wanting to be tied to scandal. And Amanda? She showed up at my house 3 nights later, long after dark. I was sitting in my recliner, the hum of the old fridge in the background, when I heard her knock. When I opened the door, she stood there. No makeup. Hair pulled back, eyes red like she'd been crying for days. "Dad," she whispered, voice breaking. "Everything's falling apart." Jacob's furious. Mom's unraveling. The house? We might lose everything. I motioned her inside, poured her a cup of coffee. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with math homework, the same table where I'd cried when she left for college. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "That you owned the land?" I shrugged. "Because it didn't matter. Not until they made it matter. I never cared about wealth or status, Amanda. I cared about respect. And when your in-laws stripped me of that, I had no reason to protect them anymore." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have stood up for you. I thought I was building a future, but I see now I was just stepping on the foundation you built." I reached across the table, placed my hand over hers. "Amanda, I don't need your apology. I just need you to remember who I am. I'm not worthless. I'm the man who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who never stopped loving you." For the first time in months, she met my eyes without shame, and in that quiet moment, I felt the dignity that Diane had tried so hard to strip away settle back into my bones. Weeks later, the Kesslers moved out of their mansion. Couldn't afford the new lease terms, couldn't face the whispers. Their empire crumbled piece by piece, social, financial, reputational. In a town like Carmel, that kind of fall was permanent. A's for me. I kept my shop running, kept my old Chevy humming, kept living the simple life that had always been enough. People in town started looking at me differently, not with pity, but with respect. They'd nod at the gas station, shake my hand at church. They all knew. The man Diane called worthless had turned out to be the only one with real worth. And Amanda? Slowly, she found her way back. Not to the Kesslers' world, but to mine. So when folks ask me if I regret it, taking back what was mine, showing them who really held the power. I just smile. No, I say. Because sometimes the only way to remind people of your value is to let them fall without you. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.